The screen flickers. Just for a moment, barely perceptible, but you notice it. That slight distortion in your browser. That momentary lag when you click a link you probably shouldn't have clicked. Have you ever wondered what exists in the spaces between the internet you know and the internet that hides? Not the dark web you've heard about in documentaries, sanitized and explained away by security experts, but the real thing, the digital abyss where human darkness pools like stagnant water, where every click might be your last anonymous act before someone, somewhere, starts watching you back. Tonight, I'm going to share 4 stories from that abyss. 4 encounters that real people claim to have experienced in the hidden layers of the internet. For descents into a world where the usual rules don't apply, where law enforcement is a distant concept, and where the things you find might find you first. Ask yourself this question: if you could access anything, see anything, buy anything with complete anonymity, what would you do? More importantly, what would others do? The dark web represents approximately 96% of the internet, a staggering figure. That should make you reconsider everything you think you know about the digital world. The surface web, the Google searches and social media platforms you use daily, accounts for less than 4% of what actually exists online. The rest is submerged, hidden behind encryption protocols and specialized browsers, accessible only to those who know how to navigate the shadows. It wasn't designed for evil, you understand. The Tor network, the most common gateway to these hidden services, was created by the United States Naval Research Laboratory to protect government communications. The irony is exquisite and disturbing. A tool built for protection became a sanctuary for predators. Our first story begins with Marcus, a 24-year-old computer science graduate student from Portland, who considered himself well-versed in internet security. In the autumn of 2018, Marcus downloaded Tor out of curiosity, the kind of dangerous curiosity that often precedes terrible mistakes. He wanted to see what the fuss was about. He told a small community of users he later confided in. He wanted to understand the architecture of hidden services, to explore the technical aspects of anonymous browsing. For the first few weeks, it was disappointing. Contrary to popular belief, the dark web isn't an endless carnival of depravity readily available at your fingertips. Most of it is mundane. Forums, marketplaces selling drugs or counterfeit documents, political dissidents communicating beyond their government's reach, privacy advocates sharing encryption techniques. Marcus found it almost boring until he stumbled upon a link in a forum that he still, to this day, refuses to name. The link had no description, just a string of random characters followed by a single word: threshold. Something about that word arrested his attention. He copied the Onion address, those strange URLs ending in .onion that mark dark websites, and pasted it into his Tor browser. The page took longer to load than usual. Marcus watched the connection bouncing through relays across the world. Germany, then Romania, then somewhere in Southeast Asia, each hop adding another layer of anonymity, another degree of separation from his real location. When the page finally materialized, it was simple. Black background, white text, a single question in the center of the screen. How much do you trust your reality? Below it, a countdown timer. 7 days, 12 hours, 43 minutes. Below that, a second question. How far would you go to see the truth? And at the bottom, a button, just one word: enter. Marcus should have closed the browser. He knew better. His training had taught him about honeypots, about law enforcement traps, about malware disguised as mysterious websites. But human curiosity is a powerful evolutionary force, and it betrayed him. He clicked. The page dissolved into a loading screen, not the usual buffering circle you're familiar with, but something else. A spiral. A hypnotic, slowly rotating spiral that seemed to pulse with a rhythm that Marcus swore matched his heartbeat. He watched it for what felt like seconds but turned out to be 11 minutes, according to the clock in the corner of his screen. When the next page loaded, he understood why the site was called Threshold. It was a live stream. for camera angles showing different rooms in what appeared to be an abandoned building. Concrete walls stained with water damage, exposed pipes overhead, the skeletal remains of industrial equipment long since stripped for scrap metal. The rooms were empty except for a figure in the center room. The person Marcus couldn't determine gender or even if it was an adult or child, because they wore a full body covering made of what looked like black plastic, sat perfectly still on a metal chair. The camera quality was exceptionally high, Marcus noted with growing unease. Professional grade. This wasn't some amateur production. Beneath the video feeds was a chat box, already scrolling with messages from other viewers. There were 47 people watching. Marcus could see the viewer count in the top corner, and it made him feel sick. 48 people scattered across the world, all watching this person sit motionless in an abandoned building. The chat messages were worse than the video. Users discussed what they wanted to see happen to the figure. They suggested scenarios that Marcus's mind recoiled from processing. Some messages were in English, others in Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, German, United Nations of human cruelty. But what disturbed Marcus most was the interface element he almost missed: a donation counter. People were sending cryptocurrency to the stream. Each donation apparently granted you the ability to make requests to vote on what would happen next. The counter showed that in the past hour alone, the equivalent of $17,000 had been sent. For what? To watch what? Marcus told himself he would watch for just a minute, just to understand what this was. To document it maybe, to report it to authorities. But the minute stretched. The figure on the chair began to move. Slowly, they tilted their head toward one of the cameras. And though Marcus couldn't see their face through the black plastic covering, he had the overwhelming sensation that they were looking directly at him. The chat exploded with messages. The countdown timer on the original page, Marcus realized, wasn't random. It was counting down to something specific, something these 48 viewers were anticipating. He needed to leave. Every instinct screamed at him to close the browser, to delete Tor, to maybe throw his laptop into the Willamette River for good measure. But before he could move his hand to the mouse, a new message appeared in the chat, different from the others. It was highlighted in red, sender listed as administrator. The message said, "Welcome, Marcus from Portland. We've been waiting for you." His real name is City. Marcus's blood crystallized in his veins. The message continued, "Don't bother closing the browser. We've already established the connection. The question isn't whether you'll watch. The question is whether you'll participate. Check your email." With trembling hands, Marcus opened his email client on his phone. He hadn't given anyone his email, hadn't entered it anywhere on the dark web. The top message was from an address that was just a string of numbers. No subject line. He opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was his apartment building, taken from across the street, timestamped 19 minutes ago. The next email arrived while he stared at the first. Another photograph. His car in the parking garage. Then another email. His favorite coffee shop. Another. His mother's house 300 miles away. They came faster now. A drumbeat of surveillance proving that his anonymity was an illusion. That's somewhere in the architecture of the dark web. He'd left a trail of digital breadcrumbs that someone had followed right to his doorstep. The final email contained no photograph, just text. "You have the choices, Marcus. Watch until the timer ends and never speak of this. Or close the browser and accept the consequences. You have 10 seconds to decide." Marcus made his choice. He watched for the next 7 days. He barely left his apartment. He called in sick to his graduate program. He ignored his friends' messages and calls. Every evening at 9 p.m. Pacific time, the stream went live, and Marcus watched because the alternative, those photographs, the implied threat was unthinkable. He watched as the figure was subjected to scenarios that still haunt him. Scenarios he refuses to describe in detail even years later, when he anonymously shared his story on an encrypted forum for dark web survivors. He watched as the chat directed the action like some horrific crowdsourced theater of cruelty. He watched as the donation counter climbed higher and higher, reaching 6 figures by the 3rd day. On the 7th day, when the timer finally reached 0, the stream changed. The figure, who had endured everything in silence, stood up. They walked to the nearest camera and removed their black plastic covering. Marcus expected to see trauma, expected to see a victim. What he saw instead made him question everything he'd witnessed. The person underneath was smiling. They looked directly into the camera and spoke their first words. "Thank you for your contributions. Same time next month. New threshold." Then the stream ended. The website disappeared. When Marcus tried to access it again, the Onion address led nowhere. It was as if the entire thing had never existed except for the fact that Marcus's browser history showed 7 consecutive days of a 6-hour connection to an unknown service. He never discovered if what he witnessed was real or an elaborate, deeply disturbing performance piece. He never learned if that person was a victim or a willing participant in some incomprehensible transaction. The emails stopped. The surveillance, if it was ever real, ceased. But Marcus knows one thing with certainty. Somewhere on the dark web, someone has a file with his name attached to it, a record of what he watched, proof of his passive participation in something that might have been a crime or might have been theater so convincing it became indistinguishable from reality. Have you ever asked yourself, where is the line between observer and participant? If you watch evil happen and do nothing, what does that make you? Our second story takes us to Manchester, England, and a woman named Sarah, a 31-year-old social worker who had seen humanity at its worst through her profession. In early 2019, Sarah's younger brother, Thomas, died of a heroin overdose. He was 26. The drug had been purchased on a dark web marketplace, cut with fentanyl in proportions that turned recreational use into execution. Sarah's grief transformed into obsession. She wanted to understand the system that had killed her brother, to see the marketplace that had delivered death to his doorstep with the convenience of next-day shipping. She learned to access Tor. She studied Bitcoin transactions. She immersed herself in the technical language of anonymous commerce. What she found was disturbingly professional websites designed with better user interfaces than legitimate e-commerce platforms. Vendor ratings and reviews like some nightmare version of Amazon. Customer service representatives who responded to inquiries within hours. Quality guarantees and escrow systems that actually work. The marketplace where Thomas had made his final purchase had been shut down by Europol 3 weeks after his death, but dozens of others had already sprouted to take its place. Sarah created a buyer account on one of the largest remaining markets. Though she never intended to purchase anything, she just wanted to look, to understand, to maybe identify the vendor who had sold her brother the fatal dose. She spent weeks scrolling through listings, reading vendor profiles, trying to find a match to the username from Thomas's laptop. Then she received a private message. The sender's username was simply M. The message read, "I knew your brother. I'm sorry for what happened to him, but you shouldn't be here. Sarah, this place isn't for people who still have something to lose." The use of her real name sent ice through her spine. But Sarah had learned from Marcus's mistake, though she'd never heard his story, separated as they were by geography and circumstance. She'd taken every precaution. VPN beneath Tor, fake information, a laptop purchased with cash specifically for this purpose, never connected to her home network. How did this person know who she was? She typed back, "Who are you?" The response came within seconds. Someone who helps people find what they're looking for. "Your brother didn't just buy drugs on the dark web, Sarah. He saw something. He asked questions, and someone decided he was a liability." This was insane. Thomas's death had been ruled an accidental overdose. There was no conspiracy, no elaborate plot, just a young man with an addiction and a lethal batch of heroin. She told him exactly that. Check his computer again, and wrote back, "Look for a hidden partition. Password is your mother's maiden name plus his birth year." He left you a map. Whether you follow it is your choice. But you should know, they're already watching you. You've been on this marketplace for 3 weeks. You've looked at all the right vendor profiles. You've retraced his exact steps. Did you really think no one would notice? Sarah's hand shook as she typed. What did he see? M's response took longer this time. Nearly 5 minutes. When it came, it was just a link, another onion address, and a warning. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. Your brother tried to expose it. He failed. You probably will too. But at least you'll know why he had to die. Access it from a public connection. Never from home. And Sarah, don't trust the police. Don't trust anyone who says they can help. The people running that site, they have reach you can't imagine. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She kept thinking about Thomas's laptop, sitting in a box in her closet with his other possessions that she couldn't bring herself to sort through. The next morning, she called in sick to work and retrieved it. The machine still worked. She navigated to the disk utility and searched for hidden partitions. There it was, an encrypted volume, locked, waiting for a password. Her mother's maiden name was Patterson. Thomas was born in 1993. She typed Patterson 1993. The partition unlocked. Inside was a single folder labeled insurance. Within that folder were hundreds of screenshots, vendor profiles, product listings, but not drugs. Something else entirely. The listings advertised access to live streams, similar to what Marcus had encountered, but more specific, more targeted. These weren't random victims. These were commission requests, custom content, based on buyer specifications. The prices ranged from $5,000 to $500,000 in cryptocurrency, depending on the request's complexity and the risk involved. Thomas had documented everything. He'd created a spreadsheet linking usernames across multiple marketplaces, tracking patterns of behavior, identifying what he believed was a network of producers and distributors operating a service that turned human suffering into a commodity. But the final document in the folder made Sarah's world collapse. It was a chat log between Thomas and someone he thought was a journalist, someone who'd promised to help him expose the network. The conversation had lasted 3 days. Thomas had shared everything he'd learned, provided all his evidence, explained his methods. The journalist's final message, sent the day before Thomas died, read, "This is incredible work. I need to verify some details with my sources. Can you send me your address for a document pickup?" Thomas had sent his address. 2 days later, he was dead. Sarah understood then what M had tried to tell her. Thomas hadn't died of a random bad batch. He'd been killed. Murder with the very drug he tried to expose turned into another statistic, another overdose victim no one would question. And now Sarah had his evidence. Now Sarah was asking the same questions. She went to an internet cafe 15 miles from her home. She used a computer in the back corner and paid cash. She accessed Tor and entered the onion address M had sent her. The website that loaded was clinical in its presentation. White background, professional topography. It could have been a boutique consulting firm's homepage. The header read, bespoke experiences for discerning clients. Below that, a menu with 3 categories: witness, direct, and participate. Sarah's cursor hovered over each option, her mind simultaneously wanting and refusing to understand what they meant. She clicked witness. The page explained in sanitized corporate language that viewers could access custom-produced streams based on their specifications, duration, setting, participant characteristics, scenario parameters. Everything was customizable. Pricing started at $10,000 for a 1-hour stream. The testimonials were the most disturbing element. They read like restaurant reviews, 5 stars, exceeded expectations. Producer was very responsive to midstream adjustment. Requests for stars. Quality was excellent, but delivery was delayed by 2 days. This wasn't the chaotic, amateur cruelty Marcus had witnessed. This was industrialized, systematized, a business model built on human suffering, complete with customer satisfaction guarantees. Sarah clicked direct. This category offered something different: the ability to give real-time instructions during streams, to control what happened through a secure interface. Prices started at $50,000. The waiting list was 3 months long. Sarah couldn't bring herself to click participate. She didn't want to know. But as she sat in that internet cafe staring at a website that shouldn't exist, that couldn't exist in any sane world, she realized Thomas had died trying to prove this was real, trying to find someone who would believe him. Emma's final message arrived as she stared at the screen. Your brother collected enough evidence to identify 3 producers. All 3 are still operating. One of them lives in the UK, less than 40 miles from you. The journalist he contacted works for the network. They recruit people like Thomas, people who think they're investigators, and they eliminate them. You need to decide now, Sarah. Walk away and live with knowing, or follow his path and accept where it leads. Sarah made a different choice than Marcus. She documented everything on an encrypted drive. She sent copies to 3 different journalists at major publications. International organizations focused on human trafficking. Law enforcement agencies in 5 countries. Then she disappeared. Not physically, she still goes to work, still lives in her apartment, still maintains the appearance of normal life. But digitally, Sarah ceased to exist. She destroyed the laptop. She abandoned all social media. She changed her phone number and email. She never accessed the dark web again. Did her evidence make a difference? 2 of the 3 producers Thomas identified were arrested within a year of Sarah's mass disclosure. Though neither arrest mentioned dark web streams or custom content, one was charged with human trafficking in Romania. Another was arrested in the Philippines for child exploitation. The charges were real, but they never connected to the broader network. Never mentioned the marketplace or the website Sarah had seen. The 3rd producer, the one 40 miles from Manchester, was never touched. 6 months after Sarah sent her evidence, she received a single email to her new private address that only her employer and mother knew. It contained no text, just an image. Her brother's grave, photographed that morning. Fresh flowers had been placed on it, flowers Sarah hadn't left. The message was clear. We know where you are. We know what you did. But you're not worth the attention, not worth making into another example. Just stay quiet. Sarah has stayed quiet. She's never spoken publicly about what Thomas found or what she saw. But she carries the knowledge like a weight, the certainty that's somewhere right now. Those streams are happening, people are watching. And the infrastructure exists to turn human beings into interactive entertainment for anyone wealthy enough to afford the subscription. Ask yourself, how much money would it take to compromise your morality? What would you watch if you knew you'd never be caught? Our 3rd story is shorter, but perhaps more disturbing in its implications. It comes from a hacker who goes by the handle Wisp, someone who specializes in penetrating dark web services for what they claim are ethical purposes, exposing child exploitation networks, identifying human traffickers, disrupting weapons sales. In the summer of 2020, during the global pandemic when much of humanity retreated into digital spaces, Wisp was hired by an anti-trafficking organization to investigate a rumored marketplace that specialized in something the organization couldn't quite believe was real: custom kidnapping services. The rumors suggested you could specify a target, provide basic information, and a team would abduct the person and deliver them to a location of your choosing. The price varied based on the target's security situation, geographic location, and required discretion level. Wisp was skeptical. This seemed like an urban legend, too extreme even for the dark web's reputation. The investigation took 3 months. Wisp infiltrated forums, built trust with vendors, created a credible buyer persona. Finally, an introduction to the service came through a third-party intermediary. The marketplace wasn't a website, but a series of encrypted channels on a messaging platform, accessible only through invitation. The first message Wisp received from the service was a questionnaire, not about the target, but about the buyer. Why did you want this service? What was your budget? Had you ever used similar services before? What was your technical sophistication level? Wisp answered carefully, playing the role of a wealthy individual seeking revenge against a business partner who'd stolen intellectual property. The questions felt like an interview process. This wasn't a simple transaction. They were evaluating whether Wisp was a suitable client. After 2 weeks of back and forth, Wisp was accepted. The service sent a detailed form requesting target information, full name, address, daily routines, relationships, employment situation, health conditions, vehicle information, security measures. At the bottom of the form was a section for outcome specifications. What did the buyer want done with the target after acquisition? Options included delivery to buyer's location, delivery to neutral location, permanent disposal, ransom return to family, or other. Please specify. The pricing structure was attached. A standard abduction in a Western country with moderate security awareness cost between $150,000 and $300,000 in cryptocurrency. High-risk targets people with security. Details: public figures. Individuals in protective custody started at $1 million. The service guaranteed no physical harm during acquisition unless specifically requested. They provided progress updates at key milestones. They offered insurance if the operation was compromised and led back to the buyer. They would eliminate the connection through unspecified means. Wisp had everything they needed for the anti-trafficking organization: proof of the service's existence, documentation of their processes, evidence of previous successful operations listed in testimonials. But before Wisp could exfiltrate the data and disappear, the service sent one final message. We know you're not a real buyer, Wisp. We've known since your third message. Your tradecraft is excellent, but not perfect. You made a small mistake in your cryptocurrency handling that revealed this wallet has been used in transactions with law enforcement adjacent organizations. We let you continue because we wanted you to see that we're real, that we operate successfully, and that we're untouchable. Share your evidence with whomever you'd like. We have clients in law enforcement agencies across 40 countries. We have clients in government positions. We have clients who would be very interested to know that an organization is investigating the service and who works for the organization. So here's our offer. Walk away now. Never mention this again, and we'll forget you exist. Or proceed with your exposure, and we'll demonstrate our services on someone you care about. Free of charge. You have 24 hours to delete all data related to us and confirm deletion. We'll be monitoring. Wisp faced an impossible choice. The evidence could potentially save future victims, could alert law enforcement to a service that turned humans into purchasable commodities. But the threat was credible. This organization had operated long enough to build a client list that apparently included people with the power to protect it. And they had demonstrated they knew Wisp's real identity. The 24-hour deadline itself was a message, implying they knew enough about Wisp's life to know who might be targeted. Wisp deleted everything, reported to the anti-trafficking organization that the rumors were unfounded, that no such service existed. Then Wisp quit hacking entirely, abandoned the handle, disappeared from the communities where this work happened. Before vanishing completely, Wisp posted one anonymous message on a deep web forum. Some things exist that shouldn't be exposed because exposure doesn't stop them. It just makes you a target. I learned this the hard way. If you're investigating certain services that treat humans as deliverable products, stop now. They're real, they're protected, and they have a very effective deterrent policy. This is my last message. Don't follow my path. The anti-trafficking organization continued operating, but they never again investigated the particular rumor. Wisp's warning, cryptic as it was, had been enough. The implications of Wisp's story extend far beyond one marketplace. If such a service exists, if it operates with the confidence to threaten investigators directly, what does that say about the architecture of power and corruption that protects it? How many people have disappeared not randomly, not as victims of opportunity, but as ordered acquisitions? Custom jobs completed by professionals who treat abduction as a business service. The dark web didn't create human trafficking or kidnapping for ransom. These crimes predate the internet by millennia. But the technology created a marketplace, a secure transaction platform, a rating system that ensures quality control. It industrialized horrors that once required personal networks and trust built over years. Now you just need cryptocurrency and access to the right encrypted channel. Our final story brings us back to the United States, to a teenager named Jordan from a suburb of Denver, Colorado. In late 2021, Jordan was 17, technologically precocious, and deeply curious about internet security. Unlike Marcus or Sarah or Wisp, Jordan had no particular trauma driving the exploration. No revenge motive, no ethical mission. Just adolescent curiosity and the dangerous combination of intelligence and invisibility that characterizes that age. Jordan had heard about Red Rooms, the legendary live streams where viewers could watch and direct violence in real time. Every experienced dark web user knows Red Rooms are mostly myth. Technical impossibilities given the bandwidth limitations of Tor, and the difficulty of streaming high-quality video through multiple encrypted relays. But Jordan found something different, something that exploited a loophole in the conventional wisdom about what was possible. It wasn't a stream, it was a game. Jordan discovered it through a link on a forum dedicated to alternate reality games. Those elaborate puzzles spread across websites and physical locations. The link led to a website that looked like an old text-based adventure game from the 1980s. Simple commands: look, move, take, use. The premise was straightforward. You'd be woken up in a room with no memory of how you got there. You needed to escape. Jordan played through the first few rooms easily. Standard puzzle game logic. Find the key hidden in the desk. Use the key on the locked door. Enter the next room. But in the third room, something changed. The description read, you enter a concrete chamber. In the center is a figure bound to a chair, wearing a hood. A table beside them holds several tools. A camera in the corner has a red light blinking. You hear breathing behind the hood. Jordan typed, remove hood. The game responded, are you sure? This action has real consequences. Type yes to confirm. Confused, Jordan typed yes. The screen cleared. Then, slowly, a new page loaded. It wasn't text, it was a photograph. High resolution. A concrete room exactly as described. A figure in a chair exactly as described. And a hood being removed by hands that were not Jordan's, revealing a face that showed real terror. Below the image, text appeared, the game is now live. Other players are watching. You have control for the next 60 seconds. What do you do? This couldn't be real, Jordan thought. It was an elaborate hoax, photoshopped images designed to unsettle players. Jordan typed, this isn't real. The response came with another photograph, the figure in the chair, now with a piece of paper held in front of them. The paper showed the current date and time, accurate to the minute, and the word real written in shaky handwriting. Jordan's 60 seconds of control ticked down in the corner of the screen. Other players' commands scrolled past in a sidebar. Make them answer questions. Show fear. Cause pain. Jordan frantically typed, let them go. This game is over. The game responded, that command is not recognized. You have 20 seconds remaining. An action is a choice that will be remembered. Jordan closed the browser, cleared the cache, shut down the computer. But the next day, curiosity and doubt compelled a return. Jordan accessed the game again from a school library computer, certain it would be gone or revealed as the hoax it had to be. The game loaded exactly where it had left off, now showing player returned in the activity log. The photograph had updated. The figure was no longer in the chair. The room was empty except for a message written on the wall in what looked disturbingly like blood. Players, 43. Session duration, 6 hours. Thank you for your participation. Next game begins in 14 days. Subscription required for advance access. Below that, a single line addressed to Jordan specifically. Using a username Jordan had never entered. We saw you leave. Jordan from Colorado. We forgive first-time observers their hesitation. But you came back. That shows potential. Check your email. The email was a recruitment pitch. The game was real. The message explained. run by an organization that had perfected the technical challenge of live interaction through dark web protocols, not streaming video, which remained impractical, but high-resolution photograph updates every 10 to 15 seconds based on player commands, processed through an AI that interpreted natural language instructions and directed human operators in the actual location to execute them. The victims were real. The scenarios were real. The game had operated for 3 years. The email claimed, with over 2,000 participants globally. Law enforcement had never gotten close because the infrastructure was distributed across multiple jurisdictions. The victims were chosen from populations unlikely to be reported missing quickly, and the participant base included enough people with power and resources to provide warning of investigations. The email offered Jordan a choice: delete everything and forget this existed, or pay a subscription fee for access to future games and special privileges. The cost was $500 in Bitcoin for 1 year of access. We recruit young, the email said. Players who join before age 18 receive lifetime membership. Consider it an investment in your future. The networking opportunities alone are worth more than the subscription cost. Our player base includes future leaders, current executives, people who will remember their fellow players and assist them when needed. This is about more than the game. This is about joining a community that understands power and doesn't flinch from exercising it. Jordan never paid the subscription, never accessed the game again, but also never reported it, never told anyone. Paralyzed by the implications and the fear of being identified as a participant, even in that brief session. Years later, now in college, Jordan still wonders about that game, wonders if it's still running, wonders how many of the classmates and professors and future colleagues might have been players, wonders if that community of people who don't flinch from exercising power through causing suffering to the powerless actually exists, networked and supporting each other and positions of influence. The most disturbing aspect of Jordan's story isn't the game itself, it's the business model it represented. Not just monetizing human suffering, but framing it as a networking opportunity, a way to identify and connect like-minded individuals who've proven their willingness to participate in darkness. It's the industrialization of evil, the transformation of cruelty into a subscription service with customer retention strategies and community-building features. It represents a fundamental shift in how darkness operates in the digital age. The dark web didn't invent human cruelty, but it created an infrastructure that removed friction from its expression. It created anonymity that eliminated social consequences. It created cryptocurrency that eliminated financial traces. It created global reach that eliminated geographic limitations. Most importantly, it created communities where people who would never have found each other in the physical world could connect, validate each other's darkest impulses, and coordinate actions that would have been impossible in isolation. Ask yourself one final question. What would you do if you stumbled upon something like these stories describe? Would you report it, knowing the report might make you a target? Would you investigate further, risking the same fate as Thomas or the same threats as Wisp? Would you simply close the browser and pretend you never saw anything, choosing the safety of ignorance over the danger of knowledge? These four stories share common elements that make them particularly credible among the countless dark web urban legends circulating online. First, they involve specific technical details that ring true to people familiar with Tor, cryptocurrency, and encrypted communications. Second, they describe business models and organizational structures that, however horrifying, make logical sense given the incentives and capabilities that exist. Third, they acknowledge limitations. These aren't omnipotent villains, but rather criminal enterprises with specific capabilities and vulnerabilities. Fourth, they end ambiguously, without clean resolutions, because that's how reality works. Evil isn't always defeated. Justice isn't always served. Sometimes people make terrible discoveries and simply have to live with what they know. The documented facts about the dark web support the possibility of these stories. Multiple large-scale dark web marketplaces have been successfully operated for years. before law enforcement shutdowns, processing billions of dollars in transactions. The Silk Road, Alphabet, Hansa Market, Wall Street Market. These weren't small operations. They had customer service, vendor ratings, escrow systems, and security measures sophisticated enough to evade detection for extended periods. If drugs and weapons and stolen data can be sold with such efficiency, why not services? Why not experiences? The technical challenges are surmountable. The demand demonstrably exists. If you accept that human darkness scales with population size, if even a tiny percentage of humanity desires access to extreme content, the absolute numbers globally are substantial enough to support a market. The infrastructure for anonymous payment and communication exists. The only missing element is moral restraint, and history provides overwhelming evidence that this restraint fails regularly across cultures and time periods. Law enforcement agencies have documented cases that approach the horror of these stories. Operation Bayonet, which took down Alphabet and Hansa, revealed that administrators had access to staggering amounts of illegal content and services. The takedown of Playpen, a dark web child exploitation site, revealed thousands of users worldwide. The NTH Room case in South Korea, which involved Telegram channels but operated with dark web operational security principles, showed that audiences for exploitative content can number in the tens of thousands. These confirmed cases demonstrate that the infrastructure for the stories I've shared exists, that audiences exist, and that operational security sophisticated enough to evade detection for years is achievable. Marcus's story about the live stream reflects confirmed incidents of exploitation. Content distributed through hidden services, though the interactive element and direct targeting remain unconfirmed. Sarah's discovery of her brother as evidence mirrors several real cases, where investigators, both amateur and professional, have faced retaliation for getting too close to dark web operations. Wisp's encounter with the kidnapping service aligns with documented instances of services for hire, advertised on dark web marketplaces, though successful prosecutions of such services remain rare. Jordan's game combines elements of several documented phenomena: interactive exploitation, gamification of violence, and recruitment of young participants into criminal networks. What makes these stories particularly effective at generating fear isn't their gore or shock value, but their plausibility. They sit just at the edge of confirmed reality, extrapolating from known facts into probable but unproven territory. They leverage our understanding that the dark web exists, that terrible content circulates there, and that technical anonymity enables behavior people would never risk in identifiable contexts. They exploit our knowledge that wealth can purchase almost anything, including things that shouldn't be for sale. Most frighteningly, they reflect the banality of evil in the digital age, the way horrific acts can be commodified, systematized, and discussed in the sterile language of business transactions. The true horror isn't a supernatural threat or an unknowable monster. It's human beings choosing to participate in or enable suffering because they can, because the technology allows it, because the anonymity absolves them of accountability, because the community validates their choices, and because the market rewards it financially. If these stories haunt you, consider what that fear reveals. It's not fear of the unknown, it's fear of the known. Fear of what humans demonstrably do to other humans when they believe they can escape consequences. It's fear that somewhere in the vast dark web, activities like those described are happening right now, facilitated by infrastructure we collectively built, funded by cryptocurrency we collectively legitimized, protected by encryption we collectively demanded for our own privacy. The dark web is a mirror that shows us what humans become when we remove the social, legal, and moral constraints that shape behavior in identifiable contexts. And what it shows us is disturbing not because it's alien, but because it's recognizably human. But for people in these stories, Marcus, Sarah, Wisp, and Jordan represent different responses to encountering darkness: complicit observation, vengeful investigation, ethical exposure attempt, and curious participation. None of their responses led to justice or resolution. None of them stopped the activities they discovered. They simply became people who know. People who carry the weight of knowledge they can't effectively act upon. Perhaps you're now one of those people too, having heard these stories. Perhaps you'll search for evidence that they're false, comforting myths designed to scare, or perhaps you'll search for evidence that they're true, unable to resist confirming what you suspect. Either way, you'll be searching, thinking about what exists in those hidden layers of the internet, wondering if the person next to you on the subway or in the coffee shop might be one of the 48 viewers, one of the players, one of the subscribers to services that shouldn't exist but probably do. The screen in front of you flickers again. Just a glitch in the rendering, a momentary lag in processing, nothing more. But now you notice it differently. Now you wonder what's happening in that fraction of a second when your screen goes dark. What processes are running in the background? What connections might be establishing without your knowledge? The dark web isn't somewhere else. It's accessible from the same device you use for everything else in your life. The same laptop, the same phone, just a few downloads away. The barrier between the surface and the abyss is thinner than you think. And now you know what might be waiting on the other side. Sweet dreams.